We're going to take a look at the Star of Bethlehem today. This is really a biannual lesson that I've been teaching for the past 6 years or whatever. This will be my third, maybe fourth time to teach it, but I don't do it every year. I'll do it every other year. So it's been 2 years since I've done it. And I try to improve upon it every time. This time you'll see some, for those of you who've seen it before, you'll see I tried to make it a little bit better. But it's kind of a fun thing. Certainly there's worship in it because it's biblical. The Star of Bethlehem is. We see a lot of events that occur, miraculous events related to astronomical things that occur in the Bible. Joshua's long day. Remember when they were fighting the battle and the sun stood still, so they could continue fighting through the night and win the battle. And then remember when the sundial moved back 10 degrees, and things like that. No question, but these were supernatural miracles. No way to explain them. God had to intervene with the physical laws of the universe and do something supernatural there for those events. And certainly that could be the case for the Star of Bethlehem as well. But we read in the first chapter of Matthew about these wise men who were looking for a star. Matthew says that they came from the east, somewhere out of Persia perhaps. The Magi, really, that's the root of our word magician. And so, but they weren't magicians. They were wise men. They were members of the royal courts back then. They were known as kingmakers. They also had a lot to do with secret wisdom of that day. They were astrologers. They would read the stars and things like that. There was a Mesopotamian prophet named Balaam, if you'll remember back in the book of Numbers. Balaam was that prophet of God who was actually a bad guy. But God can speak even through donkeys. He can spoke through his donkey. He can even speak through bad guys. And so Balaam, this prophet of God, said, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. And of course, this is a messianic prophecy, and all the scholars agree that this is a messianic prophecy, and that this star refers to the Star of Bethlehem. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter, meaning his kingship, shall come out of Israel. Now, it's generally accepted by most scholars that Jesus was born somewhere between 7 BC and 1 BC. The dating, we didn't put the dates down until many centuries later, and so you can't really go by the year 0 AD or whatever, or the 1 AD date, but there are a number of historical markers that let us know that this would be about the time. They allow us to pin down this time period. But there were also some incredibly spectacular celestial events that occurred during this period of time. Astrology was practiced by everyone. I mean, not practiced necessarily, but at least everyone was interested in it, including Caesar Augustus back at that point in time. They used astrology for predictions about the future. They used it to determine who would be the next ruler, the birth of kings, and things like that. Now the Jews, of course, didn't practice astrology. But they did see the stars as signs placed by God. They saw that the stars had meaning, or had significance, at least from God. Now, there's an interesting connection here between the Magi and Daniel. Of course, Daniel was the Hebrew young boy who was taken to Babylon. We studied him last summer, and he ended up being recognized by Nebuchadnezzar as one of the wisest men, and he made him chief over all the Magi, the Bible says in Daniel chapter 2. And it turns out, I don't know whether you've heard of some odd religions called, one religion called Zoroastrianism. It's hard to say. But anyway, there was a man by the name of Zoroaster who turns out was a pupil of Daniel in one of those areas. He was from Persia. And because we see in Zoroaster's writings, he predicted a king of the Jews, a Messiah. And he also wrote down certain portions of the prophecies given to us by Daniel in his books. And so, but Zoroaster went further, and he said that it would be heralded by a sign in the heavens. This is in Zoroaster's books, a sign in the heavens in the constellation of Virgo. So what was this star? Could it be supernatural? Or could it be some astronomical event? Certainly, as Christians, we would have no problem believing that it was a supernatural light that came and appeared, led the Magi all the way from there where they lived to Jerusalem, and then to Bethlehem, and even to the house where Jesus was. And got no problem with God doing it like that. But what I want to do today is really investigate whether or not there could have been some astronomical phenomenon. That would be equally miraculous. God would have had to have orchestrated, the positions of the planets to lead the Magi, to trigger them to come worship Jesus, because that's what it said they did. They came to worship Jesus. And so at the very least, it would be a miracle of timing and placement for those stars. So we're going to take a look at it from that perspective today. So what was this star? Well, there are a lot of things up in the sky that we can point to that it could have been, but meteors are too temporary. Meteors, like the falling star, they come through and they are flash in the pan and they disappear. So it wouldn't last long enough to be a meteor. And a nova, an exploding star, would only last maybe a couple of years. And so that wouldn't be long enough for them to recognize it, plan their trip, make the travel on camels and horses or whatever, and the caravan that it would take. I mean, that would be a big deal to move that many people. And by the way, it wasn't necessarily 3 wise men. We get that from the song. And the song gets that from the fact there were 3 gifts. Well, yeah, there were 3 types of gifts, but that doesn't mean there were 3 kings. It doesn't even say they were kings. It says they were wise men. So we 3 kings of Orient are is just a song. But the records show that there was only one faint nova. The records from the Chinese used to keep very detailed records of these astronomical events, so we can look back in their records and see whether or not there was a nova at that period of time. And there was only a real faint one recorded in 4 BC, and it would only last 2 years anyway. And there was really no supernova. Now, supernova is a very bright exploding star. I mean, you could definitely see it, but there was no supernova recorded during that time. There was one recorded in 12 BC, but that would have been too early for that. And also, Matthew requires that this star appear in the eastern sky and that it move across this starry background and then go before the Magi to Judea and hover over this place where Jesus was. And the only candidate for that would be either comets and planets. Now, comets, they last maybe 100 days, and so that wouldn't be long enough. But they do move across the sky. You can see them. You remember when we saw Comet Hayayuki and what was that, Hale-Bopp and so forth. We saw that for about 3 months. You could look out in the sky and see it. It was amazing. And they've got the tail and everything, so that would have been interesting as a candidate, but it doesn't last long enough, about 100 days. So really, that leaves us with planets. Planets would be the only candidate for the possibility. Now, when they looked at planets, they didn't see planets. They didn't know they were planets. They just thought they were wandering stars back then. Now, before I go any further, I need to give you a disclaimer. In no way am I advocating astrology or reading the stars into the Bible. Clearly speaks against all that, and so I am not doing that. But in order for you to understand what I'm about to explain to you, you need to realize that the Magi themselves were astrologers, and they read the stars, and they looked at a lot of these things. And so we need to understand what it was that they knew. And so we're going to kind of put ourselves in their mindset as we look at what happened with this thing. And we need to understand the meanings to the constellations and the planets and the stars. Each one of these objects in the sky would have certain associations with them. Now, you see the constellations, when you see Virgo, the Virgin, or Leo, the Lion, unless someone told you that this was a lion, you wouldn't have looked up there and said, oh, look, there's a lion up there. It doesn't come out that way. And so the meanings were assigned to these constellations not because of what they looked like, but because of the stories they were trying to tell, and because of the things that they had attached to it, not because of their appearance like that. So there was this prophecy of a great king who would be born in Palestine, a great king of the Jews, that is, and that it would occur during a triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the skies, and that it would occur in the house of the Hebrews, or a constellation known as Pisces. And we read about this prophecy in various writings, particularly Zoroastrian. And so perhaps the Magi looked at that. We're going to take a look at that one anyway. But this particular triple conjunction had occurred already, by the way, back when Moses was born. And so it's an interesting concept. I mean, Moses was really was the most revered prophet of all of Judaism. He was the one that started the nation, really, when they were born in Egypt. So really, he'd be more important than Abraham to the Jews. Moses would be. But that conjunction really announced the birth of Moses. Matter of fact, Josephus, you know who he is. He's the historian, Roman historian, who was a Jew, wrote down all these things. He recorded that Pharaoh was informed by his Egyptian priest that this conjunction was up in the sky, and that it meant that somebody would be born that would be king of the Jews and free the slaves. And so Pharaoh didn't like that, and so he had all the babies killed. Remember, Moses was just been born, and so that was what started all that business, was that same conjunction. And isn't it interesting that the same conjunction ends up getting Herod to do the same thing later, trying to kill all the little babies. So we're going to take a look at this historical but plausible scenario. We're going to take a look at a set of celestial events that were historical. We can actually look at them. And it's very plausible as to whether it could have been the Star of Bethlehem or not, because the Bible clearly points out that there was a star that led the Magi there. But before we do that, we need to learn a little bit about this concept of retrograde motion. The stars, the planets actually move in the sky, and then they take what looks like a loop in the sky against the background of stars. So we're going to take a look at a demonstration of that in just a minute here. And then we're going to look at this triple conjunction that occurred during 7 BC, and perhaps look at how it may have sparked the Magi's interest. But there's an even more remarkable series of conjunctions that occurred during the 18-month period from about 3 BC to 2 BC. That I think is probably even more significant, and probably has even more plausibility, that is, of that being the star that would have led the Magi directly to Jesus' house. Now, I want you to use your imagination as we go looking through this thing, because you'll need to understand what was the Magi. So, as I speak about these planets, I'm going to actually do a demonstration of a planetarium show. Now, I did this 2 years ago. And I always get flustered when I do it live, because I'm having to work the software and talk and do it in the dark and read and everything. So I actually did this yesterday afternoon, and I recorded it. So you're going to hear a recording of me doing this. And so it'll allow me to sit down and watch it with you. So let me see if I can hook all this up now and get this going. Okay, we're going to look at an animation that I found on the internet. It's a little applet that demonstrates the retrograde motion of planets. You're looking at two views on this screen. The right-hand view here is what we would see from our position on the Earth, looking towards the planet Mars, this little red dot being the planet out there. And the other view on the left here is from outer space, looking down on our solar system and showing the orbits of the planets around the Sun. Mars again here is in red, the Earth is in blue here, and the Sun is yellow there. Now I'm going to run this demo twice. The first time I want you to concentrate on the right hand side to see the phenomenon of this retrograde motion over a period of several months. We would go out in the sky and look at this planet Mars moving against this background of stars every night, and we would record where it is. So this is going to be like a several month period of time that we watch this, but we're speeding up the picture we get every night like this. You see Mars moving across the sky to the left here, and then it reverses, it stops sort of and reverses its motion and starts to move back again. And it gets to this point and then begins to reverse its motion again and finally moves back to the left and proceeds across the sky. Now, the ancients called these kinds of stars, they thought they were stars, by the way, because they didn't know about planets back then, but they called these the wanderers. They would wander around the sky, and so they were very interested in these stars. So what's the explanation of this phenomenon? Well, we're going to run the simulation again. This time I want you to focus on the left-hand side, but as you're watching what happens on the left-hand side, sort of keep a peripheral view of what's going on with the right-hand side too, so you can kind of tell as Mars is moving around its orbit what's happening in the view over here as well. So you might want to look back and forth or kind of keep that in your peripheral vision. Now, first of all, let me say this. Mars has a slower orbit than the Earth because it's further from the Sun and has a longer year. We have a year of 365 days. Their year might be 2 years or 3 years. I forget what it is, but anyway, the reason why is because Mars has so much further to travel to get its way around the Sun. Now, at certain times, the Earth and Mars come close together. In other words, they end up on the same side of the Sun together. But because the Earth is so much faster than Mars, the Earth will catch up and overtake Mars, and Mars is going to appear as if it's backing up. Now, this is only because of our view changing. Mars doesn't really back up. So let's run the demonstration here and see what happens. Watch on the left-hand side as these planets move around. You see Earth moving towards Mars, and the angle between Earth and Mars is changing here. And the angle starts the angle, notice this point. I'm trying to hold my cursor where you would be seeing, and the cursor kind of moves back at this point and then moves forward again. Now, if you've been paying attention to the right-hand side, you would have noticed that that's followed exactly what was happening over here. Run it one more time. Mars and Earth. Earth's catching up with Mars. It'd be kind of like a car driving down an expressway and you passing that car. It looks like the car is backing up when you're right next to it, but then you realize it's moving forward as well. You've just passed it. So this is what we see on the right-hand side as that phenomenon occurs there. The ancient astronomers were very interested in these sorts of observations, and it would have had much meaning to them as they observed the sky every night. So now we're going to look at a planetarium demonstration. One of the celestial events that would have excited the wise men who made a practice of studying these stars was a triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the constellation of Pisces occurring in the year 7 BC. There is in the sky a circular belt of 12 constellations surrounding the Earth called the zodiac. The planets, as we see it from the Earth, appear to move around the zodiac, and they wouldn't know they were planets. They would have thought they were stars just moving around this zodiac. But the entire solar system, all our planets, are like in a flat disk in one plane, and Jupiter makes a complete circuit of the zodiac every 12 years as it rotates around the Sun. Really, according to our view, we rotate around the Sun 12 times in the same length of time that Jupiter rotates around once. And so we observe Jupiter moving around this zodiac like that. Saturn makes its way through the zodiac every 30 years. It's also called the ecliptic. That's the path the moon and stars and sun and planets make across the sky, which would be the plane of the disk as we look out into the universe and the galaxies like that. Now, about every 20 years, Jupiter and Saturn will come together. Jupiter passes Saturn because it's going around faster. And when they appear to come very close together, it's called a conjunction. Occasionally, there's a triple conjunction because of this retrograde motion that I just demonstrated. A triple conjunction will occur in Pisces, the constellation we're looking at here on this screen, about once every 1,440 years. Now, triple conjunctions are not that uncommon, but it's rather uncommon for them to occur in a particular house of the zodiac like this. Jupiter was regarded as the royal planet, the sign of the kings. And they also had a system of assigning parts of the Mediterranean world to each one of the 12 houses of the zodiac. In Pisces, this constellation was assigned to the land of Syria and Palestine. The equinoctial point, which is the point of the zodiac which is occupied by the sun on the first day of spring, in other words, where the sun rises on the first day of spring, whatever constellation that sun rises in, that's known as the house of the rising sun. And at that point in time, it was moving from Pisces to Aquarius. What happens is, because of the slight wobble of the Earth on its axis, this equinoctial point will slowly move through the zodiac, spending about 2,000 years in each house. And so currently the astrologers in our day are saying that it's the dawning of the age of Aquarius. In other words, it's moving out of Pisces into the constellation Aquarius, or the house of Aquarius. That's what they mean when they say that. So there's also a system of assigning planets to different countries or people groups, and Saturn was assigned to the Jewish people. So let's go through a demo now. But you might wonder why it is that we could say where these particular stars would be on any given date in the past or in the future. But it's because there are exacting physical laws that govern the motion of the planets and the stars in a very precise mathematical way. God said in Genesis 1:14, "Let them be," talking about the stars that is, "let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years." And so they're like clockwork. You can actually set your clocks by the motion of the planets and stars. Now, this fact makes it possible for us to have a planetarium software like this, that we can specify where we're going to stand. Right now, I'm saying that I'm standing right above Syria right now, where the wise men perhaps would be. And it also lets me specify what time of day it is. Right now, it's 4 o'clock a.m. on April 13th and 7 BC. And again, it allows me to specify what I want to look at, what I want to observe, what part of the sky I want to look at. So I'm looking off the eastern horizon, close to sunrise, right before sunrise that is, at this constellation of Pisces, and I can see Jupiter and Saturn just coming up on the horizon here. So notice this horizon will always be at the bottom of our screen, just as if we're standing up right here. So as we look further up in the sky, you may not see the horizon, but you'll know it's always below you as far as the screen orientation is concerned. So pretend that we're the Magi, and we're looking at exactly what they saw back in 7 BC, and we're going to see this triple conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter occurring. Here they are on the horizon, about to rise, and so I can move forward. The software allows me to move forward day by day, and so here's what we see the next day, April 14th, and then on April 15th, 16th, 17th, as we move forward, you can see Saturn moving closer and closer to Jupiter. Now, these things, these two planets and the constellations are higher and higher in the sky each day. So now we're going to move forward. We're looking at 4 o'clock in the morning. We're going to move forward to about May 31st. So I'm sitting on May 13th, and as I continue to move forward, you'll see Saturn and Jupiter come very close together, so that on May 31st, they're in a conjunction in this constellation of Pisces. All right, now we're going to continue to move forward, and you'll see Saturn now moving away from Jupiter, and you're going to see you see the moon passing by every now and then, and you see that the sky is turning. Now we're standing on the ground, and the horizon is still at our bottom, and so what's happening is we're having to turn to a different compass point to look, and so the sky is turning because we're kind of turning around so that we can continue to observe these two planets. But now we're in August, And Saturn now has taken its loop and it's moving back toward Jupiter again, so for the second time. So it's passed it once, it's had a conjunction, one conjunction, and now here we are close to the horizon at 4 o'clock a.m. on September the 22nd, and we have another conjunction. But the planets are about to set in this western sky right here, so we need to back up so that we can continue to observe these things this year, so we can see the third conjunction. Now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up an hour. So we're now looking at 1 o'clock a.m., 12 o'clock a.m., 11 o'clock a.m., and 10 o'clock a.m. I think I want to leave this, actually go back to 9 o'clock p.m. So here we are earlier in the evening, looking at this conjunction on September the 21st. And we're going to continue to move forward in days now. And we're going to move forward. You'll see that Saturn comes close to Jupiter. Now it's moving away from Jupiter again. And it appears to pause. And then come back toward Jupiter for a third time. So that at the end of November, close to beginning of December, you see that Saturn and Jupiter come for a third time in 1 year. Now, so here we are on December the 5th, and they've come back together for the third time. Now, let's consider what these wise men would have thought about a triple conjunction occurring in the constellation of Pisces during this celestial, 3 times in this 1 year, this celestial event. They've got this knowledge of astrology. They understand what each one of these planets and constellations mean as far as their symbols are concerned. And they've also got a connection with Daniel, the Hebrew prophet, who happened to be the chief of the Magi under King Nebuchadnezzar. And they learned a lot about the Messiah from him, the prophecies that Daniel made, the 70-year prophecy. It learned that the Messiah would be presented as a king after 69 weeks of years, and that he would be cut off in the middle of the 70th week. And so they had the timing of this, that they would know the exact time it would occur. And they could have interpolated back to the timing of this one's birth that Daniel had spoken of. So given this triple conjunction in Pisces, the wise men could have interpreted it to mean the king who is to reign over the golden age to come is born in Palestine. Now, prior to this conjunction in Pisces this year, the last time it occurred was about 1440 years earlier. And that happened to be right when the very year that Moses was born, about 83 days prior to Moses' birth. So it's interesting that the only times in the history of creation that we know of that this triple conjunction in Pisces occurred was during 2 great events when one sent from God would free God's people. Moses freeing the Jews from Pharaoh in Egypt, and Jesus freeing us from the shackles of the law, allowing us to live in grace. And so what a picture of that event that this is. So this rare triple conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn occurs only every 1440 years, and it's got the Magi's attention now. Perhaps they began to make some plans to greet this new king who would be born. Now we're going to look at an even rarer combination of celestial events that occurred during an 18-month period around 2 to 3 BC. This combination of conjunctions that occurs during this time only occurs every 3,000 years. Alright, so here we are on May the 3rd of 3 BC, and we can see Venus, the mother planet, in the constellation of Pisces, which is the constellation for the land of Israel, along with Mercury right here on the horizon, and it's the messenger planet, and it's rising in the east right now. So we're going to move forward toward June, and we're going to see how Venus and Mercury move away from Pisces. And then we're going to see Saturn, the protector planet of the Jews, coming into the picture. And Venus is moving toward it. And then Venus and Saturn on June the 13th have a conjunction. Okay, now we're going to continue moving. So here's the first interesting conjunction during this period of time. So we're going to move forward quickly past June and July, and we're going to see Venus move through Gemini and Cancer and move towards the constellation Leo. And then on August the 12th, Venus has a conjunction with Jupiter, and it's the royal star in the constellation of Leo. Leo also happens to be the symbol for the lion of the tribe of Judah. Each one of the 12 zodiacs constellations also is a symbol for one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Alright, now we're going to continue moving forward in this demonstration to August the 18th. And on August the 18th, Venus and Regulus have a conjunction now. And you're going to see Mercury, the messenger planet, coming back into the picture there on the horizon in the constellation of Leo. Now, continuing to move forward to August the 24th, you see that Venus and Mercury have a conjunction. Now, this conjunction is kind of interesting because as we move forward, you'll see that this conjunction stays together for many days, as if they want to announce something is about to occur. So I'm going to continue moving forward, and you can see Venus and Mercury moving together in a conjunction for this number of days. And finally, we're going to get to September the 14th, and you see Jupiter and the star Regulus come together in a conjunction on September the 14th. So this is the first conjunction between Jupiter, the kingly planet, and Regulus, the kingly star, in Leo, the royal constellation, on September the 14th of 3 BC. Alright, what I'm going to do now is center lock Leo so that it becomes the center of our view for the rest of the time here. And I'm going to move forward rather quickly to February. So we're in September, and I'm just going to hold the key down here for just a minute and watch how Jupiter moves away from Regulus and then comes back to it. Moving away, we're in November. It would turn around to the other horizon, the other point of the compass, and Jupiter starts coming back towards Regulus. Single stepping, we're in January now. And then on February the 14th, we have another conjunction. Jupiter and Regulus are in conjunction again, with the full moon looking on, by the way. Here's the moon coming up here. This is actually February the 18th now. And these two planets are about to set in the western sky here. And so we're going to need to back up to 8 o'clock p.m. so that we can continue to observe these planets. So I'm going to back up now to 3 o'clock in the morning, 2, 1, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. So now it's earlier in the evening of the same evening of, well, actually February 27th, that night before, or 17th, I should say. And so we're going to now move forward until we get to May the 7th. And we're going to see another interesting thing. Jupiter's going to move away from Regulus now. And now we have to move towards the other horizon again. And Jupiter is coming back towards Regulus. And they have a conjunction again on May the 8th. And so they're meeting now for a third time. Alright, now we're going to move forward in time to June the 17th. And you see Jupiter moving away and Venus quickly coming into the picture here. Venus moves past Regulus and then touches Jupiter now, a conjunction with Jupiter on June the 17th of this is 2 BC now. And so we find the Jupiter, the royal planet, and Venus, the mother planet, back in conjunction with the messenger planet there on the horizon, Mercury, looking on. Alright, so now I'm going to have to go reset this thing back to 5 o'clock a.m. because you can see we're in the west and these two planets are about to set in the western sky, and so we won't be able to see them until the next morning. So I'm going to move now forward in time. We're going to have to move around to the other horizon to watch the sunrise, and so we're going to move forward in the morning to 5 o'clock a.m. And so now We see Jupiter below the horizon here. You see the sun having just risen. It's in the summertime, so the sun rises early in the summertime. 5 o'clock a.m. on June the 18th now. Okay, we're going to move forward now to August the 26th. Now, as I do this, I want you to watch what happens to these things. You're going to see Mercury Jupiter moving up. Mercury moved past Leo, and Mars comes into the picture. Mars is the planet of war and danger. The sun's getting lower and lower in the horizon because now Mercury did a loop and it's moving past. And so on August the 15th, Mercury and Regulus, Mercury the messenger planet, touches Regulus. Jupiter's about to rise right there with the sun, and Mercury and Mars both are coming back towards Jupiter. So the danger planet and the messenger planet here on August the 26th have a triple conjunction of the planets, and Venus is looking on. Venus, being the mother planet, is looking on. And it's just before sunrise now. The sun's just below the horizon. So we're going to continue to watch this dance of the planets. Mars, the danger planet, begins to move down and away towards the horizon here. And Venus and Jupiter, Venus is turning around now. And they're all moving towards a new constellation. They're moving out of Leo. Venus and Jupiter now on October the 13th have a conjunction. But they're moving towards a new constellation called Virgo, the Virgin. And so Jupiter continues to move towards Virgo. I'm going to center lock Jupiter now so that we can see what's happening. You can see Virgo, the Virgin there. And Venus and Mars have both moved past Virgo, the Virgin, and Jupiter is moving into Virgo now. And you see me having to move myself around on the horizon as these things get further and further around the sky. And then in December, it looks as if Jupiter stops its forward motion, moving day by day, and you don't see hardly any motion occurring here with Jupiter. And so on December the 25th, Jupiter has completely stopped in its motion in the sky in the constellation of Virgo, and it's all by itself now. Now imagine the Magi having carefully observed this choreography of the planets, and they've been watching it for really since 7 BC, and they've watched this set of events occurring as they've been traveling towards Jerusalem. And they've met with King Herod, and they've asked him, where is the one who would be born King of the Jews? And so now they're ready to leave Jerusalem early in the morning to find the town where this one that might be born would be, or the one that's been born at this point would be. And Jupiter, the star that they've been observing all this time, is where in the sky? Well, it's in, if we move this picture up here, and see where we are on the horizon, you'll see that Jupiter is looking towards the south, right between south and southwest. And if you're standing in Jerusalem at this point in time, that's exactly pointing towards where Bethlehem would be, the town of Bethlehem, on December the 25th. And so now they're ready to leave Jerusalem early in the morning. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, and they look up at Jupiter, the star they've been observing all this time, and they see that it is standing over the south towards the town of Bethlehem, where they are to go greet this new king with gifts. And notice the serpent constellation, Hydra, is watching all of this going on beneath the feet of this newborn king, and looking on with great interest at this point. So, did you use your imagination about all that? The kingly planet arriving at the kingly star Regulus in the royal constellation Judah, and having a triple conjunction in one 18-month period of time, and the Magi interpreting all this, and combining that with what they knew from Daniel, and then putting it all together and coming to Herod to say, where is this one who be born King of the Jews? We want to worship him. And so regardless of how they got there, whether it be by astrology or whether it be by a supernatural star that God put out there, that was their purpose in coming. So what's the point here? Let me get rid of this Star of Bethlehem here. What's the point of looking at this? Well, in Matthew 2:2, for we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. That's what we need to do. It's all about what we're going to do, our coming to worship his coming. That's the Advent. In Titus 2, verse 11 through 14, it says, for the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in the present age, looking for the blessed hope and glorious appearing of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us that he might redeem us from every lawless deed and purify for himself his own special people, zealous for good works. That's a great summary of what our life as Christians is all about right there. And notice the middle verse there, verse 13. We're to be looking for his coming again, because he's come once, he's coming again. His glorious appearing will be coming again. Our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. So we sang about that little baby, heaven's child. He is God in the flesh, God with us, God himself, worthy of our worship, the only one worthy of our worship. So that's the point. That's why I wanted to bring up, I found it interesting about that Star of Bethlehem and what it could have been, how it could have brought the wise men. But the most important point was why they came. They came to worship, and that's what we need to be about. Let's have some prayer time.